Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Stanley. This is Wes Warren. And today we're talking about prepping for economic downturns. Wes, what have you seen?
So yeah, today's topic, we're going to talk about three ways to prep, doomsday, nuclear winter. And '08, there were a lot of preppers going on, built bomb shelters and all kinds of that thing. Well, we're going to talk about what you can do with your practice, reasonable things that you can do to be ready for anything that gets thrown your way. But first, we're going to talk about current trends. Everybody asks me, virtually every client, every time I get on the phone with somebody, that what are you seeing? Is anybody down? Are you starting to see any cracks, any problems in terms of anybody hitting their numbers, anything like that? I just want to say, to be clear, so far, nothing. All of our practices that I'm working with, it's business as usual. They're hitting very normal months. A lot of our doctors take off time in the summer. So as far as that goes, they're doing that, still hitting good numbers, even though they're taking time off. So I'm just not seeing any kind of change in terms of buying habits of patients. Nothing yet. Greg, have you noticed anything yourself?
Well, we're still suffering, of course, from the labor shortage. In fact, we've suffered from it for so long. I think too many doctors have even forgotten that it's going on and just learned to accept that they're two people short or three people short going forward. And they're not even they're just hoping more people don't leave. Too much of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. That's probably obviously, those of you listening, you guys know that this is the number one problem of dentistry right now, is the labor shortage, getting good people in the practice. Everybody we've talked to, all of our practices are growing, but they're doing it with being chronically understaffed and marginally trained team members.
This reminds me of something I just want to cast your mind back on. There was a time when we ran around the country and nobody was joining any insurance plans, and they would talk to each other almost conspiratorially, like, hey, let's don't do this. I'm not doing this. Are you doing this? And nobody was. And insurance companies struggle to get enough people to fill the ranks, of providers. Well, it was like insurance companies presented their bill. It was a big discount and nobody accepted it. We're kind of at that point right now with hygiene. Hygiene has presented its bill. They want incredible increases. Right now, dentistry hasn't decided whether they're going to accept it or not, or literally morph into some new format for providing treatment that may or may not include hygiene. That's where we're at.
Yeah, so our first thing you can do to prep your office is make sure hygiene is strong. In every economy that I've seen, I've only seen two. So the 2001 crash, the '08 crash, the practices that had robust hygiene didn't feel a thing, actually grew, was no problem. The practices that struggled were the ones where it was thin, the hygiene base, and they were surviving off of, a couple big cases that come in and just kind of put the month together, the cherry on top. So our suggestion here is to absolutely try to maintain the same amount of columns that you've always had. Over the last year or two, I've seen too many offices, they lose a hygienist and they don't really go out and hire somebody, and they just kind of let a full column disappear. I mean, to build back a full column of hygiene can take 3 or 4 years of pain. I would not do that. I would pay the price. I would get the hygienist in there. I would accelerate hygiene if I had to, use an assistant to try to get kind of makeshift 2 columns going. And usually that means you've got to put the hygienist on commission so that they get something for that. It's all part of strategies I would do to maintain the number of columns of hygiene that you've always had. Now, a lot of you are down from COVID, and that's a mistake too. You shouldn't. You should really try to figure that out. And a lot of people are kind of stuck at the old wages, 38 or 33 or $35 an hour. And now it's at 50 or 55. We have some areas that's even hitting 70s. Unless you're up in that 70 range, you definitely in that range, you're going to have to use accelerated hygiene or something to make the numbers work. Other recommendations, Greg, on that? Where would you kind of draw the line in terms of
it's a good question, Wes. If you're sure this is where the market is, if you don't get the phone to ring until you're at 60, 65, or 70 or 75, you're not in the game. You got to find out where the market is, and you've got to meet it. Since I've been doing this, which is a lot of decades, I've seen hygienists go from getting $40 an hour all the way down to $15 an hour and then back up. In other words, it's not really static. So the feeling that this is going to go on forever, at these high levels, probably is not true. But that's the bill that's being presented to us. And if you want hygiene, at some point it's going to get cheaper to find an associate doctor, but they're not necessarily easier to find than a hygienist.
I will tell you, just as a rule of thumb, this is what's at stake. You lose a hygienist 4 days a week. You lose 4 columns like that. You're losing $50,000 a month of restorative dentistry. That's what's walking out the door. Practices can kind of, when that does happen, kind of keep things afloat for a while. You got but it will come back down by that amount in time. That's what's at risk when you lose a full column like that. And coming into an economic recession, that could be your
profit.
Well, your profit, but you're like a spring. A lot of practices, that's extra. Yeah, I'm already too busy, and so I can't even do the dentistry. Well, I'm already at capacity every day. I really can't add more. And so losing a couple columns of hygiene really doesn't impact me. Don't even feel it. And it might be right. But in an economic downturn, you could feel it if you don't maintain where you're at. So that's a huge thing that I can't stress, is to maintain your hygiene and where it's at.
Can I just tell you too, another daily phenomenon that goes on in a lot of dental offices, not all of them, but a bit of a antagonistic relationship where the hygienist knows they're valuable, they get paid a lot. The doctors can kind of develop a little bit of resentment. I am paying so much to her, man. Couldn't she just sell something, sell some night guard, sell anything, And so that goes on. And then they come in and present another $20 an hour. And this is where some people are going to lose it. They're going to simply say, well, we'll just do without it, not knowing what that really means. I thought you just did a good job of putting numbers to that, what we're going to pay to give up these columns.
Yeah, and that is what it is. That is the number across the board, across the country. It's not going to vary much. That's kind of what it's worth. Some doctors can do a little better, but that's kind of the bare minimum as far as what a column of hygiene is worth per month. The other thing kind of related to hygiene is making sure we don't have these holes that I see all the time. Hygiene coordination has become a problem in practices as we have turnover at the front desk, and we got new people, and it's just the ball is being dropped in terms of the commitment of the people at the front doing what it takes to keep hygiene filled. So as I said before, a column of hygiene is worth 20 or 50,000. So if it's 20% of the time it's vacant because we're just not working hard enough at the front desk, you can take 20% off of the restorative side. It's costing you $10,000 a month in restorative dentistry because they're not running it effectively at the front desk.
Can I add something I wouldn't be doing right now as I look at the moving parts of the economy and so forth? I wouldn't be investing heavily in expensive technology with a marginal return. In other words, somebody tells you, start using this, and it costs $150,000, and it'll sell more dentistry. I hear this kind of thing all the time. And actually, it didn't get better than the flashlight in most ways, as far as presenting and selling dentistry. So be careful. This is, we lived through this before. You mentioned, Wes, you've been through a couple of these downturns. I actually lived through the 1980 to 82 inflationary period. A lot of tech came into dentistry, and it ultimately died. It died off Broadway, and a lot of people had debt. They had payments associated with it for a decade to come. So one of the things we learned back then was, in inflation, don't go out and pay a lot of money thinking you're going to make it up on something that you almost can't even define to a patient. So stay clear of that.
Yeah.
It's a time to be saving money, avoiding debt, and if you have to have debt or you have to invest, it has to be where you can see very quick returns. This idea of playing the long game, we're for that, but probably not at this moment.
Right. If you were going to, it would be like an operatory, adding an operatory to a practice.
See, that's really
instead of buying some gadget that costs $100,000.
Diagnostic gadget that patients can't even understand. Okay, what else, Wes? What else do we need to be thinking about?
So number two, so that's number one, hygiene. We got to make it robust, strong, and filled, so that the restorative that comes out of it, it's maximized for that. Next thing is new patient drift, is what I'll call it. I see this a lot in economic downturns. People get spooked, have a bad month, and they just shut their marketing off. They'll trim their marketing dollars and just get spooked in general and try to save in areas like that. I would not do that. Do not resist that temptation to dial back the marketing budget. The other thing that I see with this new patient drift, I see this in practices now. We have capacity issues in terms of getting new patients in. A lot of practices are down hygiene days, hygiene hours, and so hygiene is full, and we can't get new patients in. And so we go from 1 month where we have a lot of new patients, and the next month we have almost none. And so we have these big spikes and big drops in new patient flow. This needs to be fixed, addressed in all the practices as they prep for any practice downturn. We need consistent new patient flow. And so we do that by holding blocks in hygiene for new patients. This is where you just go in and figure out how many new patients we typically get a month, or what we're going to anticipate. And we just start putting in blocks into the schedule, into hygiene, and hold those blocks until 48 hours before the appointment. And then it can be released to anybody at that point, and the front desk's job is to fill it. If done correctly, that shouldn't happen very often. And so this should level out your new patient flow. And I would say nearly 70–80% of my offices struggle with this. If they don't have the blocks in, they have a capacity issue with getting new patients in. Right now, because we can't get hygienists on the floor, we have to do this. We have to have blocks held off. So I would get your practice geared up for that. You can certainly set those blocks up real easily 6 months from now and start moving to the present, to the now. Most of you will find it pretty easy until you get around 3 months from today's date. Then you're going to just have to pick and every week look for spots and add a few blocks, do the best you can, but you're only a few months away from having a nice, even new patient flow, month in, month out, day in, day out. That also is very important. So that's number two, Greg. Number three is insurance. People ask, should I be in and out? We have strong feelings, as far as what we've seen in the past. Can you tell them what you saw, over the last, the big 08 crash in terms of insurance and its effect on practices that were in or out of network and their struggles? What did you see?
Well, the people that were in network, they kind of did pretty good, and it was all kind of getting formulated at that time. It wasn't as well defined as it is now. people would defiantly say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be in network. And it was a point of pride. And it ultimately, in time, you paid a price to not be in, a bigger
Right.
price than you would think. In fact, in our time, having associates that you are tasked with feeding and you're not in network, probably pretty tough.
I'll tell you, when we used to get calls, or we still do, we get calls all the time. And when we hear a doctor tell their story, they'll say, it was doing really good. '08 happened and it never came back. You know, I was doing 120 and now I'm consistently at 80. It never came back. And we go in, we learn more about the practice. And one thing that always sticks out is I'm not in network. I'm out of network. I'm not in network. The practices that are out of network can really struggle to grow, to maintain, especially during a downturn. Now, with inflation hitting, cost of staff and all that going up, a lot of offices are actually getting out of network, which we're not against either. But we would be hesitant to get out of everything. I would describe this, we talked about this just before we got on. It's kind of like sending you out to disable a bomb. And, just like in the movies, you got your phone and he's telling you, okay, cut this wire. Okay, cut the red wire, cut the red wire. And you're about to cut it. And he goes, wait, is there a yellow wire? Is there a yellow wire? Don't cut the red wire. Cut. It's kind of like that. Getting out of network, there's a lot that goes into making that decision, and which ones to get out of can be tricky. And so we certainly advocate practices that are over demanded, to start getting rid of the weaker plans where they're discounting a lot. But I would be cautious about getting out of the big plans that still pay well, because in an economic downturn, people really start to hide behind their insurance. If you have questions about this, if this is something that you are contemplating being in or out, what should I do? Give us a call. Like I said, this one is like dismantling a bomb. There's a lot of things that go into it, like new patient flow, replenishment rates, retention rates of your new patients, how much demand you have in hygiene, how much demand you have in restorative, and then the discounts you actually are giving to be in these plans. All of those things matter. And we kind of need to know that on an individual basis to decide whether it's safe to get out of plans or not. So that if that is you, I would highly recommend that you utilize one of our spots that we save for people that listen. We save approximately one appointment a day, so 5 a week, that we will, no charge, we'll walk you through this. We'll let you know our thinking as far as getting out of network. But I would be cautious about being super aggressive here. And like Greg pointed out, if you got associates, it's almost impossible to be out of network. We see it, but I would say it's probably about 10-20% of our big associate practices are able to survive out of network. And usually they're in a state where the reimbursements and it's not quite as big and dramatic. And so that's what we're seeing. Those are the top things that I think that you should make sure that you do and prepare for as you worry about some kind of economic downturn. I think that if you position yourself right, you should be able to grow during that time. Most doctors right now are reducing capacity, which means there's patients out there looking for a home. And we've seen marketing be very easy right now to gather up that patient base. So this is a time for you to actually grow, not get cautious. You can
Wes, this is a time too. A lot of doctors are losing their culture with their staff. They're losing their consumerism with their patients. They're marketing, they're questioning what it's costing them.
Right.
In other words, if you're crossing the desert on a horse, you don't want to shoot it because it gave you some trouble. You know what I mean? You still got to get across the desert. So some of these things got to stay. I know you're tired of them. I know you don't like it. You might want to check with us before you make some radical changes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.